Muito bom dia a todas e a todos os membros da comunidade da Nova, aqui presentes e também aqueles que nos estão a acompanhar à distância via YouTube. É com enorme prazer que dou as boas-vindas a todos a esta primeira edição do Nova Sustainability Week. Saiu melhor, mas também estou igualmente nervoso. E que este ano será inteiramente dirigida, num certo sentido, para dentro. Quer dizer, não estamos em portas fechadas, mas o objetivo é dirigir esta semana para dentro, para a comunidade da Nova, para permitir uma forma de autoconhecimento nesta área. A Nova assumiu, é um enorme prazer mesmo, já agora, é um enorme prazer a muitos títulos, a título pessoal, como cidadão, como reitor, é um aspecto que tenho, digamos assim, que me tenho esforçado muito por promover dentro da Universidade desde o meu primeiro mandato, portanto já há 5 anos, e é um enorme prazer ver a adesão das escolas, desde as suas direções, aos seus grupos académicos, departamentos e centros, principalmente aqui, claro, ao seu, vamos dizer assim, staff profissional que não é de natureza académica, que tem também aderido imenso e, portanto, isso é um enorme prazer para quem, como eu, acredita na força e na importância do desenvolvimento sustentável, que aqui está, no fundo, absorvido numa palavra só, sustentabilidade. A Nova assumiu, e eu já disse isto várias vezes, acabei de dizer quase outra vez, ao longo do meu mandato, a agenda dos Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável e, mais recentemente, do Pacto Ecológico Europeu, chamado Green Deal, como sendo a sua, da Universidade, grande agenda com a sociedade e para o futuro. Este é um compromisso, digamos, que suporta a nossa visão estratégica de sermos uma universidade global e cívica, que é um mote que eu propus. Não fui só eu, foi surgindo coletivamente de uma espécie de co-criação da ideia para a universidade para a próxima década. E é também o nosso mais ambicioso compromisso, pois o seu sucesso depende de vários fatores internos e externos, a maioria dos quais está fora do nosso controle direto. Portanto, há muitas coisas que nós não controlamos. Fatores que se interrelacionam e também depende da nossa capacidade de contribuir para mudanças na agenda do conhecimento, nos seus resultados tecnológicos e principalmente no seu impacto na sociedade em prol do desenvolvimento sustentável. Mas este é, diria eu, o desafio do século XXI. A sustentabilidade tornou-se, creio, um valor europeu. Certamente é um valor também global, mas foi politicamente assumido por uma região, a União Europeia e pela Europa. Isso é óbvio em todas as políticas europeias, é óbvio no modo como estão a ser, digamos, direcionados os financiamentos europeus. E, nesse sentido, ele está colocado ao nível, diria eu, dos direitos humanos, ou, se quisermos, da liberdade, ou da democracia, e, num certo sentido, podemos pensar que a sustentabilidade, na medida em que ela envolve também a sociedade e o cidadão, quase que absorve sem os anular, como é evidente, esses outros valores através dos quais a Europa se constituiu como Europa nos últimos, digamos, 300 ou 400 anos. Mas, como todos os outros grandes valores sociais, valores que são fundadores de um certo tipo de sociedade, a sustentabilidade comporta uma dimensão política, quer dizer, ela envolve decisão e planeamento, e uma dimensão de conhecimento e de formação, envolve, digamos, educação, ciência e cultura, se quisermos, que suporta e informa as decisões políticas individuais que se venham a tomar, ou institucionais de outra natureza, empresariais, por exemplo. E mesmo uma dimensão de inovação, visto que usa o conhecimento numa certa direção, por exemplo, em prol das energias renováveis, e não noutra, por exemplo, em prol das energias extrativas. Contudo, como todos os grandes valores sociais, não é? Estes valores fundadores de um certo tipo de sociedade, a sustentabilidade comporta uma dimensão de estar na moda, de ser quase obrigatória na comunicação institucional, que a transforma ou corre o risco de a transformar numa espécie de uma buzzword, quer dizer, o risco de produzir uma usura do termo, tornando aplicável a tudo e por isso não significando nada. Imaginemos frases como cozinhar a batata frita sustentável, ou frases mais dramáticas como invadir um país soberano de forma sustentável, ou como desflorestar a Amazónia de forma sustentável. Não é? Neste sentido, dado o alcance e dado, digamos, este risco, digamos, comunicacional da banalização, o alcance enorme que tem e o risco da banalização, acho que fica definido, vamos dizer assim, in limine, o desafio para a Universidade Nova, neste caso. Assumir estrategicamente a sustentabilidade, não se perder a fazer ou a comunicar falsas iniciativas alegadamente sustentáveis, portanto, ir ao que efetivamente interessa, e contribuir com conhecimento muito relevante para a decisão política e para a planificação da ação de todo o tipo de instituições, não só políticas, evidentemente, empresas, instituições de caráter social, câmaras municipais, ONGs e dos próprios cidadãos, que eles vão ter que tomar individualmente, e garantindo, ou, digamos, enquadrando essas decisões em prol da sustentabilidade. E o que é que tem feito a nossa universidade até agora? Bem, é mesmo o objeto desta semana, é, digamos, tornar isso mais conhecido. A nossa atividade académica em prol da sustentabilidade, no melhor sentido deste termo, que só vou passar a usar nesse sentido, começou já há bastante tempo, portanto não estava dependente da iniciativa de ninguém, nem de nenhum reitor, estava dependente essencialmente, digamos, da atividade e da convicção dos nossos académicos, dos nossos estudantes e de outros profissionais. Começou já há bastante tempo, de forma muito diversa, muito dispersa e muito relevante em todas as nossas escolas. Eu sublinho, em todas as nossas escolas. É essa montra de atividades que vamos ver ao longo desta semana, não é? A integração e potenciação estratégica. Integração envolve conhecimento e capacidades de articular. Potenciação estratégica envolve passar para outro nível. De todas essas atividades, começou mais recentemente com a aprovação da plataforma estratégica Nova for the Globe. Os estatutos da Universidade Nova de Lisboa comportam, além das unidades orgânicas, a possibilidade de serem constituídas plataformas estratégicas. São o quê? São lugares de colaboração das várias escolas em torno de grandes desafios, não é? Que têm que ser criados por um processo que os estatutos prevêem. Tem que ser uma iniciativa do reitor, vai ao colégio de diretores, tem que ser aprovado e depois tem que ser, digamos assim, aprovado de novo, digamos, no Conselho Geral para passarem a pertencer, digamos, à estratégia da Universidade. E são até publicados como o anexo 2 aos estatutos. O anexo 1 são as unidades orgânicas, o anexo 2 são as plataformas estratégicas. Esta plataforma, Nova for the Globe, é desde 2020, quando foi aprovado o plano estratégico, uma plataforma estratégica da nossa Universidade. Tem dois conselhos, um conselho académico e um conselho operacional. Enfim, percebe que o conselho académico trabalha na área do ensino, da investigação e da inovação. O conselho operacional trabalha na área, digamos, da atividade institucional. Nós podíamos ser muito bons do ponto de vista do conhecimento de como limpar o oceano de microplásticos e ter uma atividade institucional, uma política interna desastrosa relativamente aos plásticos, não é? Portanto, percebe-se que são duas coisas que estão ligadas, mas são largamente independentes, não é? Está focada, obviamente, nos 17 desafios do desenvolvimento sustentável, mas eu tendo a imaginar que está arrumada em 3 grandes pilares. O clima, contudo, os desafios climáticos associados, ecossistemas, a sociedade e, especificamente, a saúde global, não é? Porquê? Porque em qualquer uma destas áreas é fácil perceber como é que os 17 desafios, 17 objetivos se articulam nestes 3 grandes pilares. Há agendas que são absolutamente interconectadas, elas interferem umas com as outras, mas são em larga medida independentes, não é? Portanto, eu saber como limpar os microplásticos dos oceanos é muito diferente de eu saber e ser capaz de reduzir desigualdades sociais ou de ter uma política que garanta a não proliferação de pandemias, por exemplo, ou de doenças crónicas que se estão a tornar globais, não é? E, portanto, temos essa plataforma estratégica que agrega, portanto, virtualmente toda a Universidade Nova, mas certamente todo o conhecimento e toda a atividade, digamos, institucional da Universidade, e, mais recentemente, temos uma pessoa na equipa reitoral, como de resto está previsto nos estatutos, que deve ser coordenado por alguém da equipa reitoral, que coordena esta plataforma, que é a professora Júlia Seixas, a quem eu aproveito por agradecer o trabalho feito até agora e quero aproveitar agora que estou a agradecer à professora Júlia Seixas, para agradecer de forma igualmente encarecida a todos os colegas, a todos os membros da comunidade nova, pela atenção que dão a este assunto e que não precisaram certamente de mim para a dar e pelo incremento dessa atenção, digamos, no futuro, que eu espero certamente que venham a fazer. A Sustainability Week é, digamos, uma das primeiras, mas certamente não a única, iniciativa já desta, digamos, desta coordenação da professora Júlia Seixas. Acho que vai ser visto em algum momento desta semana o novo site, não sei se estou a antecipar, e isso parece-me, enfim, o design e o conteúdo parece-me que é já uma coisa muito interessante do ponto de vista da montra e da capacidade de agregar, assim motive novas atividades. Coisas práticas, como eu estava a dizer, o comportamento institucional também interessa. No último colégio de diretores, em que estão os diretores reunidos com o reitor e com o resto da equipa reitoral, tenho o prazer de partilhar convosco que no último colégio de diretores, para responder à emergência da atual escassez de energia e água, os diretores das escolas aprovaram um conjunto de decisões que terão impacto direto na redução dos consumos e que vão desde a otimização de espaços, a programação de equipamentos de ar-condicionado, a redução de rega de espaços exteriores, a uma campanha de comunicação interna. São medidas concretas, eu não as vou enunciar aqui a todas, embora elas sejam muito, digamos, muito concretas, no sentido que são formuláveis de maneira muito simples e que vão ser monitorizadas para garantirmos que elas estão a ser aplicadas e para percebermos também o contributo que elas estão a dar para a redução dos consumos de água e de energia. Mas isto são, digamos, coisas práticas que fazem parte da nossa obrigação e responsabilidade como uma instituição que aderiu à sustentabilidade, mas há outras duas dimensões estratégicas, ambas europeias, que eu gostava de referir para terminar e que são muito importantes e nas quais estamos envolvidas. Uma, estamos envolvidos permanentemente, visto que esse veio agora, digamos, a confirmação e o financiamento, numa aliança de universidades chamada Eutópia. É uma aliança de 10 universidades europeias, eu julgo que as pessoas saberão o que são estas alianças, digamos, é neste momento uma área muito importante de política de ensino superior da União e da Comissão. Nós não fazíamos parte inicialmente, fomos integrados posteriormente, juntamente com a Universidade de Dresden, na Alemanha, com a Universidade de Ca' Foscari em Veneza, e esta aliança tem como grande tema a sustentabilidade. Precisamente nestes, se quisermos, nestes pilares que estávamos a falar, ambiental e social. E estamos envolvidos também, aqui não permanentemente, mas competitivamente, portanto, num certo sentido, no Horizonte Europa. O Horizonte Europa, como se sabe, é o maior pacote de sempre de financiamento de investigação e de inovação que a União Europeia põe à disposição dos Estados-membros e está mais de 70% orientado para questões de sustentabilidade. Portanto, é um grande desafio e um grande convite que eu faço a todos. Apostem na Rede Eutópia. A Rede Eutópia pensa uma meta-universidade europeia como tendo 10 campi diferentes espalhados por toda a Europa, articulando, digamos, e coordenando agendas e estratégias em prol de uma Europa mais sustentável. O Horizonte Europa é onde está o dinheiro, não é? E nós precisamos disso, certamente. Pronto. Uma nota ainda para a natureza dos desafios científicos e educativos em que estamos envolvidos quando integramos as questões da sustentabilidade através, por exemplo, dos ODS na nossa estratégia. Todos esses desafios têm dois elementos comuns que são os seguintes: eles são, em regra geral, muito difíceis e muito complexos, como agendas de conhecimento. Isso implica agendas colaborativas dentro e fora da Nova e abordagens interdisciplinares. Portanto, a interdisciplinaridade não se faz porque é uma moda, porque é giro, faz-se porque, para, digamos, abordarmos os desafios do desenvolvimento sustentável, os desafios têm um nível de complexidade que as ciências biomédicas têm que colaborar com a sociologia, estou a dizer, digamos, quase ao caso das pessoas que estou a ver aqui, a engenharia do ambiente tem que colaborar com uma área qualquer das humanidades, etc. Pronto. E Isso deve ser feito, nós sabemos que é como está estruturado também o pacote do Horizonte. A partir de missões é importante que a Universidade, colaborando com os seus parceiros europeus e outros, académicos e não académicos, assuma missões específicas que depois digamos, se desagregam em vários projetos, e essas missões que tenham a ver com descarbonização, com combate às desigualdades, com aquilo que os académicos entenderem, que os académicos é que fazem a agenda, como é evidente, não há ninguém, nenhuma direção, nenhuma universidade ou nenhuma escola que dita a agenda científica aos académicos, isso faz parte da vossa liberdade, por isso é que eu vos agradeço terem aderido livremente às questões da sustentabilidade e vos peço que continuem a desenvolver esses tópicos. Nós temos, de facto, as nossas faculdades, institutos e escolas, temos nelas o conhecimento, o talento e a capacidade para, colaborando, assumir e enfrentar com sucesso essas missões e contribuir com soluções adequadas para os vários problemas em que elas se desdobram. A existência desses recursos constitui, se quisermos chamar assim, uma vantagem competitiva, uma marca diferenciadora, mas, acima de tudo, um dever. Este é que é o ponto importante. Um dever, eu diria, da cidadania científica e académica. Dever que vai ao encontro da nossa responsabilidade e da nossa missão como membros da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, servir mais e melhor a sociedade através do conhecimento. E estou certo que aqui, uma vez mais, a Nova vai dizer presente, e assim fazendo, estaremos certamente do lado certo da história. Uma boa semana para todos. Muito obrigado.
Passamos agora ao painel Valor da Sustentabilidade para a Investigação. Debate com investigadores com bolsa ERC, European Research Council, que será moderado pela senhora vice-reitora, a professora doutora Isabel Rocha, que convidou-nos a deslocar-se ao palco.
Aqui. Muito obrigada. Muito bom dia a todos. Muito obrigada por estarem presentes neste dia um pouco cinzento, mas como estava a professora Júlia Seixas a dizer, não nos podemos queixar, porque de facto, se queremos pensar em sustentabilidade, também é importante agradecermos a chuva. Gostava precisamente de começar por agradecer à professora Júlia Seixas pelo desafio que lançou a todos nós de nos envolvermos nesta Semana da Sustentabilidade, com os nossos vários pelouros aqui na reitoria e, por essa razão, também acabarmos por envolver todos os investigadores que assim quiseram participar e muitos quiseram e, portanto, agradeço-vos muito a todos os que estão aqui e aos outros que ainda virão e que alguns deles presos no trânsito, esperemos que consigam chegar a tempo. Eu vou já dar uma nota de que esta sessão, quando começarmos a discussão, vai ser em inglês, apesar de hoje, durante a semana, sempre que possível vamos fazer em português, mas excepcionalmente, porque obviamente um dos investigadores não conseguiria acompanhar e, portanto, vamos passar para inglês. Mas eu antes vou fazer só 2 ou 3 palavras para explicar o porquê de termos pensado em fazer esta mesa redonda, porque achamos que era uma excelente forma de arrancarmos com os nossos trabalhos hoje de manhã, e eu chamo de trabalhos porque penso que vai haver muito trabalho intelectual aqui durante a manhã, e portanto pensamos que uma forma perfeita de iniciar seria trazer alguns dos investigadores que de alguma forma são líderes nas suas áreas de investigação, e que, portanto, acabam por representar, serem modelos para outros investigadores mais jovens. Eu falo, certamente haverá muitos outros, mas nos investigadores que são investigadores principais de bolsas ERC, e, portanto, são as bolsas mais reputadas ao nível da União Europeia. Portanto, temos outros investigadores líderes, certamente, e convidamos para estar aqui todos os investigadores ou grande parte dos investigadores que tinham bolsas ERC ativas, alguns deles não puderam vir, e portanto eu agradeço muito àqueles que puderam e que estão aqui e que eu chamo também para o palco, penso que sou eu que chamo, não é voz off. Portanto, posso começar por chamar a professora Cristina Brito, o professor João Conde e o professor Alex Armand. E a conversa, before I switch to English, a conversa será certamente sobre o que é o trabalho da investigação, o que é que são as áreas de investigação, que são certamente investigação de ponta em diversas áreas da universidade, e a curiosidade de perceber como é que se incorporam os temas e os desafios da sustentabilidade nos objetivos e nas metas da investigação. Eu começo então por fazer 2 ou 3 linhas de apresentação. A professora Cristina Brito é professora investigadora na Faculdade de Ciências Sociais e Humanas, portanto na FCSH, e é membro ativo da Cátedra da Unesco Património Cultural dos Oceanos, da Rede Global Ocean Space Initiative e do Observatório Europeu do Consórcio Humanities for the Environment. O trabalho que tem desenvolvido ao longo da sua carreira, dedicado ao passado dos oceanos, das sociedades humanas e das realidades não humanas, culminou com a atribuição da bolsa ERC Synergy Grant for Oceans, que é uma Synergy Grant que é em conjunto com 3 outros investigadores de diferentes países. E é a primeira ERC Synergy Grant obtida na área das humanidades em Portugal. Muito obrigada, professora Cristina Brito. Apresento todos os outros para depois passarmos para o inglês. O professor João Conde é investigador e professor na Nova Medical School, onde se dedica à nanoengenharia, direcionada à medicina de precisão na área dos nanomateriais. É fundador da empresa de biotecnologia TargTex e tem neste momento uma ERC Starting Grant que tem como objetivo desenvolver o código de barra genético para perceber como reagem as células à terapia do cancro da mama. Finalmente, o professor Alex Armand é professor e investigador na Nova SBE, onde desenvolve a atividade na área da economia de desenvolvimento e avaliação de políticas. É investigador no Nova África, onde o seu trabalho está refletido em vários projetos que tem liderado um pouco por todo o mundo. O seu projeto mais recente é uma ERC Starting Grant, que tem como objetivo avaliar o impacto global da contaminação das águas costeiras no desenvolvimento económico. I will switch now to English, so I would like to ask each one of you first to tell us a bit more about your projects and your career, your research. And also sharing with us some thoughts about the impact of your work in terms of society, industry, and so on. And then we will pass to the topics of sustainability. But I would like to first give us some more details about your work.
Muito obrigada. Bom dia a todos e a todas. Hello everyone, good morning all. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. It's my pleasure as always. I'm an historian, an environmental historian with a background on marine biology. So interdisciplinarity is within myself and my career, and most of all in this project that brings us here today. So this ERC Synergy Grant, which is different from the others here today and the other ERC grants, is one that involves more than one PI, myself and 3 colleagues, so Nova, Trinity College Dublin, and NTNU, which is a technological university in Norway. And we are 4 people from different backgrounds, but all of us within the humanities. The project for oceans, it's called the Human History of Marine Life, and it means exactly that. We are studying the past history of animals from the sea, resources from the sea that were important to societies over time. In fact, in the past 2 millennia prior industrialization, and we are trying to understand these animals, populations and ecosystems together with the societies, different people that were engaged in exploring, learning, using these resources. As any ERC, it's quite ambitious, so it's meant to be global, try to understand the global impact of the exploitation of marine life by people over time, and of course to add new basic knowledge on this topic. We know that humans have been using resources, always of course, but land resources and agriculture are really strong parts of human development, settlement, evolution, migrations, and what we are trying to understand is in fact how the exploitation of the sea, of the resources of the sea has impacted and in fact has driven people as they again settled, evolved, developed, and also how they adapted to the different environments and the conditions that they have been. It's, it's long-term, it's trans-chronological, it's interdisciplinary, but it's also cross-cultural. So we try to understand how humans in different cultures, in different parts of the world, different regions, with different worldviews, this is really important, the way that people had perceived the world in different times, have related similarly or not to the sea, to the ocean, and to the resources. So this is the main topic of the project, and then I can get a little bit further on.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is João Conde. I'm from Nova Medical School. I'm a group leader and a professor, and I would like to thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure to talk about what I love to do. I think that's the most important. What we do in the lab is to create new solutions for unmet medical needs in cancer mainly. And so what we develop is new materials that can perform better, that can be improved when in comparison with the conventional methods. We all know that, for example, chemotherapy barely changed in the last 50 years. We are just combining new old line drugs for the same cancer types, and so this is it's of utmost importance to develop new materials, new vehicles that can be much more efficient to target disease cells, disease tissues, and treat cancer patients. So that's our main goal. And we saw that with nanotechnology now. We are all here, most of us was injected with nanoparticles carrying a messenger RNA against the SARS-CoV-2 that encodes for the SARS-CoV-2, at least the ones that were injected with or inoculated with Pfizer and Moderna. So nanotechnology, it's everywhere, and it's everyday practice. And this idea started a long time ago. So, actually, it was a professor, a physicist that was Richard Feynman, that asked, why cannot we write the entire 24 volumes of an encyclopedia on a head of a pin? And so this idea really started to grow a lot, and nanotechnology is a huge market nowadays, a billion dollar market. And so this is really important also for the sustainability of research, because I think also, and we will talk later about that, funding, it's probably one of the most important aspects also of sustainability. But that's it. I know my ERC, it's about it. It's about creating a new therapy for breast cancer patients, where we can profile the heterogeneity that exists between cancer patients and even within the same tumor of a specific patient. And so we are trying to develop a genetic barcode, biobarcode, that can profile different signatures of the breast tumors, the different breast tumor types, in order to understand which cell type of the tumor, because the tumor, it's a very complex system. It's like a city with broken streets. And we are trying to get the huge truckloads of medicines into all of this really complex network. And we really need to understand which cell type is playing in which game of this, and which streets in this very complex system. So this is the idea of the ERC, but the ERC is just one project of many projects that we are doing in the lab. So thank you so much.
All right, so thanks a lot for the invitation, and also thanks for doing it in English. Otherwise, I guess the level of discussion would have been primary school level. So good to be in English. My name is Alex Armand, so I'm based at Nova School of Business and Economics. I'm an economist. Parts of my research, most of my research has to do with applied microeconomics, so it's about policy evaluation. But part of my research has to do with the role of water for economic development on different levels. So I've been studying how policymakers can improve access to water in Indian cities, for example, or at the same time the role of dependency on the ocean for food in developing countries, and how ocean's characteristics can affect human development, where human development includes mortality, health, and other indicators later on in life which have to do with income and well-being. My ERC project has to do, it's closely related to the role of the ocean, and the objective is to estimate the impact of coastal water contamination on economic development on different aspects, so starting from health impacts, going through other type of impacts which have to do with, for example, violence, political outcomes, and so on. As economists, part of the research has two main objectives. One is to quantify these relationships globally, and the second one is to find to try to estimate this relationship in a causal way. In terms of sustainability, we all know, at least these days, that poorer countries tend to be more polluted, but we know very little what is the reverse effect. Okay, so what is the consequence of growing up in a polluted society on future development and income of these societies?
Thank you so much. I guess that most definitely all of your work is related with sustainability, with the different SDGs. My curiosity is on if you have thought about it and if you think about it from that perspective of trying to address different challenges on sustainability. And also, in many cases, your approach is to study a problem or a phenomena or whatever. My challenge is, in those situations, how do you think you can then contribute to a solution to improve something, or if that is not even the case, which of course is totally fine. So I can start again with this.
Okay. Our team in this project and in other projects that we are conducting, we are part of the Center of Humanities of NOVA, based on Faculty of Social Science and Humanities. And we do within our research unit this approach to humans across time through multiple lens. So try to understand how people have lived. But of course we cannot exclude, and that's part of what we are doing, we cannot exclude the relation of humans with non-humans and the environment and the oceans in this case. So we try to understand how all of these has made possible to the co-creation of historical narratives. And what history, among other sciences within the humanities, tell us is that, well, not just learning from the past to apply today in the future, but also that there is this ability of adaptation and resilience within societies and within people that can be learned and adjust. And that there are many different societies that adapt very differently to the same problem. So we can learn from one another, and by doing so we can in fact learn from the past and apply it to the present. We have been working, so our main goal is to produce knowledge, basic knowledge, new knowledge. But of course we have, well, we live in society, we have the duty to give back. And by doing so, among other SDGs, we are contributing, well, climate change a little bit, cooperation for education and knowledge, but of course we are contributing to SDG 14, life below water, in new perspectives, in a way that other sciences are still, well, we have here another colleague that's not from the natural sciences or the physical science, it's not from oceanography or other area, and we can in fact from different perspectives and different scientific views contribute to a global understanding of the problems and address these societal and environmental questions. Food security is an issue today, but it has been a very important, huge natural scientists to learn and listen from the human sciences and social scientists, and of course the other way around. So we are in this kind of quest, in fact, for the humanities, for the ocean, so that knowledge that is produced can be integrated in the global policy making, and also can reach to different stakeholders when dealing to the oceans, ocean management, ocean conservation, and humans living by the ocean, through the ocean, and in the ocean. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, maybe I can build from this because my project is very related. So when I started studying these topics, I was very surprised by the fact that we all think that sustainability is something that is very recent concept. While if you think about the ocean, actually, you can find out that there are economists or demographers that published models about sustainability, especially theoretical models of sustainability, more than 100 years ago, where the question was very similar to today's question. How can we exploit the ocean in a way that we can continue exploiting it forever? Now, in the recent case, we are now turning attention to a slightly different type of sustainability problem, where we want to, at least in my project, trying to quantify what humans have already impacted by not respecting those ideas of sustainability, but going beyond, and try to understand how this type of behavior can influence per se behavior of individuals. So the idea is to try to quantify and understanding behavioral changes in order to learn on how we can design policies, for example, that can help in the future trying to improve our relationship with the oceans.
Thank you. So I really think that sustainability has different aspects. As I told before, I think funding is probably one of the most important aspects of sustainability, and I think it's what allows us to also to hire and retain very talented people. Then this is also sustainability of research in Portugal. I think this is very important. And then more related what we do is our main goal is to improve the quality of life of patients, and especially cancer patients, by developing more potent, more long-lasting, more efficacious, more safe therapies. And this, at the last level, will help reduce costs in applying less efficacious treatments to patients. So it will reduce costs also in terms of cancer healthcare, for sure. And there's also a lot of other aspects that we also do in the lab by developing new 3D cellular systems that recapitulate better the diseased tissue, so we can reduce the animal testing in biomedical research, which is also very important, but that we also need, and we are aware that we need to reduce numbers in terms of animal testing. But it's something that we cannot distinguish at all, and that is something that times to appear in some countries in Europe, which is to extinguish completely the animal testing in biomedical research, and we will pay a high price for that, for sure. And especially now that we saw that in the last 2 years, the biomedical research, it's something of utmost importance for our lives and for the quality of life of our patients. And so these are the two main aspects that I see in terms of sustainability, and that we do, and we help create some sustainable environment.
Yeah, of course, that any research related with health is also addressing SDGs. So, but actually, I think it's relevant to bring a topic related with interdisciplinarity. That, in the case of Cristina, is within the birth of the project, but it's not often the case of the ERC grants. But it seems, and it has been discussed a lot, but it seems also to me that many of the complex challenges that we have in front of us related with sustainability, either environmental, social, and normally both together, they can only be addressed from an inter and multidisciplinary approach. My question, maybe starting again with Christina, because that's a very different project, so if you could expand a bit more on how the synergy projects are different from the others in that respect. How did you bring interdisciplinarity, and how did it happen in your case, and in the other case is more on if you thought about, because there's a lot to do, of course, on some basic research, on applied research, on very specific fields, before you can think on interdisciplinarity in many cases. So, which I guess is more the case of João. So the question is, how do you think you can then start interacting, for example, with people from social sciences and humanities, and if you have thought about, for example, the usability of your solutions in the future and so on. So maybe starting now with Christina.
Okay, so in our team here at NOVA, we are, and at our Center for the Humanities, we have been working with people from history, so environmental history, economic history, cultural history, history of art, but also philosophy of sciences, for instance, art and literature studies, people with background on archaeology, so archaeology and underwater archaeology. And we have already this way of addressing our scientific questions from this multiple point of view, working very in collaboration with one another, thinking together, sitting at the same table. And in fact, this was the way that this project also emerged. We are different researchers with a senior correspondent PI who put us all together. We have met in many different networks, European networks and conferences and other projects prior to this one. And in fact, when we came up with this project, and it's a little bit how we can address interdisciplinarity in science, is not just having a problem and trying to answer it from our different perspectives, but also try to think of the questions from the bottom up together. So when different people with different ways of thinking and understanding the world and different scientific backgrounds sit together and talk, they will come up with questions, scientific questions emerge, and that was the way of our project it was the way it came to be, in fact, and how we are working. And in synergy grants, again a bit different from the others, we are in fact kind of obliged to work together. So we have to make this across entities and across PI's team ways of working, so networking, workshops, brainstorming, publications, this is also very important, working and putting together our results, well, our open access results from the start to the end across teams and across disciplines, which is also really hard to do, even today. Yeah.
Can I, because it's tempting to ask, what are the hurdles of this? Of working in interdisciplinary teams, trying to publish interdisciplinary subjects, because there are not that many journals that accept those type of publications. So if you could address that.
In a very simplistic way, even the words that we use within the humanities and the natural sciences are different. They have different meanings. For instance, when we use the word population to an historian or economicist or a social people from the social science, it means something. If we are talking to a biologist or an ecologist, a population is a very different thing. So we have to start by just making sense of the words we are working with and the questions that we have to deal with. And then usually we do very specific journals within specific areas, but we tend to do as much as possible also interdisciplinary journals. There aren't that many, and we have to write very accurate science, very updated, very brand new results in a way that anyone can understand them. That's really our biggest struggle. We write, and we have to make sure that people from the natural science, the social science, and the humanities can understand what we are saying, both in terms of ecological background and historical or human background. And that's really hard. That we are doing so far, and we'll keep doing, I guess, to the end of the project. But again, working in a very open way within our team and with other teams from the scratch, from the start on, is very helpful, and people will engage much more easily, and also we learn from one another a lot. So, yeah.
So who wants to jump?
So I think this is a very important question. Actually, we always worked I always work in interdisciplinary teams, and actually our lab is really, it has very different, many different areas, from physicists to chemists to engineers to biologists to geneticists, or oncologists, and clinicians. So we are working even if it's research and it's more fundamental or more applied, it's also a very different language. It's a very different language also between an engineer than an oncologist, or even from a chemist or a biologist. So it's, I think that, to be honest, there's no hurdles in this. I think there's only gainings in this type of interdisciplinary work and the networking. And I always work like that, and I don't know how to work in a different way. We have very different collaborations. We have hundreds of collaborators all over the world, and I think this is really important. Actually, we are also working on one of the biggest consortiums, which is Global Burden Disease, from the Institute of Health Metrics Evaluation from University of Washington. And this is also a very interdisciplinary team, and we work together to create awareness for the disease, for cancer and other diseases, but mainly cancer, to create awareness in the lay audience also, which is very important, but also on the policymakers, on governments, and hospitals. And so in order to prevent diseases from happening, and in order to create this awareness in turn surrounding a specific disease. So this is also very important in terms of networking and interdisciplinary team to work in such a big consortium. So it's not part of the ERC, and it's also part, and I gained part of my experience abroad when I was in the US and UK also. And so this is really important. And we always worked I think to be honest, there's no hurdles in terms of working. Of course, the language is different, and we can talk different language between all of us, but I think that's what we can gain more in terms of the projects.
So let me say, in general, I think multidisciplinarity is very field-specific. So if I talk from an economics perspective, economics is definitely not a field that is very open to multidisciplinarity, in the sense that some questions might be taken from other fields and then imported into economics using economics methods, trying to answer very similar questions, but keeping fields very, very much separated. In terms of my ERC, it's a project that intends to be multidisciplinary in the sense of the question, because I'm not a marine biologist, so in some sense I will have no clue what are the specific impacts of pollution on marine life. I'm more interested into the impacts on humans. So in some sense, multidisciplinarity in my project comes more from a consultancy point of view. Okay, so I can talk with marine biologists, ask what they think about what I'm doing, trying to learn from them, but I don't really see incentives for a pure collaboration. I think the main hurdle comes from the way universities are creating incentives, and in this case, it's good to have a more rectory position. Because, for example, in my case, I have no incentives at all in terms of career to publish in a multidisciplinary or in other fields journals. So my career depends on publishing in economics, and I have no impact at all if I collaborate with others. Now, the personal experience during COVID, which gave a lot of incentives to collaborate across fields, we put together a group of researchers, and we wrote an article about vaccine acceptance in developing countries. And I was very surprised by the experience of publishing in other fields, which the article was published in Nature Medicine. The fact that you can have such a large impact in terms of number of citations, number of views, and as economists you're used to, you publish very well, and after 2-3 years you have 10 citations maybe. You move to other fields, and 6 months you have 500 citations. It's like being in heaven. So in some sense, I think, across collaboration, I can see a lot of incentives and interests. I just don't see, career-wise, very strong incentives for purchasing that type of decisions.
Thank you very much for your insights. They are very useful and complementary in a way. Just one or two notes here, because I cannot resist. We made an analysis of some interdisciplinarity, not only in the university but outside. And it seems to be clear that interdisciplinary work results in more impactful science. This is published, so this seems to be the case. But there's different levels of interdisciplinarity. We have some interdisciplinarity, for example, in NOVA, across different disciplines in engineering and basic sciences, for example, and that's quite impactful and very, very interesting. We don't have that much of what Christina referred to, which is where the hurdles and the challenges really begin. So when you merge social sciences with engineering, for example, or then that's where you don't know where to publish, or the languages begin to become more different in a way. The incentives, that's something that, as being in the rectory, that's something really to take into consideration. So there's something that we are thinking actually on how not only to have incentives, but how to put people sitting together and talking. And today, thanks to Julia, because sustainability is definitely something that requires interdisciplinarity, I think this is a first experiment, and I promise you that more of those will come. So I think this was a great way to end this part. We have a few. Can you introduce yourselves? Of course, we know, but...
Of course. My name is Patricia Calado, Vice Dean for Research at Nova Medical School. Thank you all. Very nice to hear you, and thank you for the Rectorate for organizing this. I was listening to our last comments, and we talked a lot about impact. And this is something that makes me think a lot, because I think it's a big challenge for research. Because we talk about impact, Isabel, you said it's impactful. But sometimes we are just saying that we have more papers or better papers, and we have this big challenge: how do we quantify, how do we access research and the impact of research, not only the papers but the socioeconomic, and now specifically today, sustainability. I would like to have a comment about you, of each of you, if you think of this in your projects, because we don't know how to measure impact. I don't think anybody knows, but you all got ERC grants, so you had to write something, all right? And we don't know because we don't know how to measure, because sometimes the impact happens 10 years from the day we do our research. We don't have units of impact. So even for this event, or for this week, or for this big initiative of NOVA, how will we measure the impact that NOVA for the Globe will have in 2, 5, or 10 years? What will be our indicators? This, I think, it's the big challenge, because we all like to be here. We all feel it's important. We all know that we can take actions to promote, for the promotion and creative incentives for interdisciplinary research, for instance, but how will we measure that? And in this case, because it's ERC grantees, or if for your daily projects, you must write something about this in the applications. Do you have any way to quantify by the end of your projects or yearly? What is your comment on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. So we will have a few minutes for that, but tomorrow we will continue on that topic. Who wants to start?
Just very briefly, we measure impact by number of papers and their impact factor. That's what the project requires us to do, and that's what we need also for our careers. But in our case specifically, we have other two ways. Well, not measuring, but trying to impact in different ways, which is, although we are talking in English today, we have a project that tries to engage the Global South. So we make sure that Portuguese and Spanish is part of our daily routines, and that we talk in Portuguese and Spanish to the people and communities in the countries that we work on, as well as in other languages. But in our case, that's our obligation to make sure that Portuguese and Spanish also, it's part of the project. And then we can have a local impact in some ways, rather than just a scientific impact. And also engaging outside the academia, so schools, kids, other levels of the society, different stakeholders. That's also a way of impacting. Not sure how to measure it, but I don't know, number of visualizations, number of citations. That's a way of doing it, I think.
Well, I think that in terms of the impact, and I talk more about the research that we do in Portugal, I think we need to be more entrepreneurs about what we do. We need to protect more our ideas, with patents and with the creation of spin-off companies or startup companies, like I did some years ago with the TACTEX. Because I know, of course, to publish in Nature, I also do, but that's not the biggest impact we can have. I think the ultimate goal, our ultimate goal, has to be on our clients. And my clients are the cancer patients. And so and to improve the life of them and to try to reach them. And in order that our ideas can get out of the labs and reach the clinics, we need to be more entrepreneurs. We need to protect, create patents, and create companies in order to translate these ideas into the clinics. And we need that the companies feed research and research feed the companies also. And this is very important environment that I think we really need to grow in Portugal still, because sometimes there was one thing that was a professor in MIT that told me, he's actually one of the co-founders of Moderna, which is Robert Langer. He told me, what I do and I like to do more is that I go to the clinicians, I go to the patients and ask what do they need, what is in need, or what is an unmet medical need, and then come back to the lab and create the solution. So I think this is the biggest impact a researcher or a biomedical researcher can have. Yeah.
Yeah, so similarly, primary impact has to be quality of research, so publication of evidence. I guess secondary has to be involvement of public opinion. So in our case, it's about communication. So we want to spend some time into trying to communicate to wider audience on the internet or other social media activities of the group. And the reason being is just that it's generally impacting policymakers is just very hard. That's because incentives are not very much aligned. So a policymaker just generally is aiming at being re-elected and saying that you should tax more people because their lifestyle is too polluting is just not very much aligned with evidence that would say that, well, you should actually tax more people to reduce their polluting behavior.
Okay, so that was a great question and great answers that allowed us to see the diversity of the different the diversity of what we call normally the third mission, so the impact of our research. So it can be generating value in companies that we create, in licensing, technology, patenting, but not only that, so communication, outreach of the society, and trying to influence policy making. So these are definitely three of the ways that we can create impact. And even in more basic research, definitely we can think about at least one of these three or other ways to create impact. Measuring it is another story, but maybe we cannot measure everything. So there, of course, we are going more and more to qualitative indicators of, especially of the impact of the research. I don't know if there's any other question. There's time for one more question from the audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your interesting reflections about possibilities of common language, about possibilities of common publication or transdisciplinary publication, and about the impact. I would like to hear, if there is some time, about if you have already any experience with connecting with public policies, with your research and the possibilities of connecting with institutions, political institutions, public institutions, and the way the politicals are made. As we know, the institutions are also very sectorial, like academic reviews, for instance. And what might be your reflections about that connection with changing policies and public policies? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, we do have some experience, and we are not being very successful. In our very specific case, I think that beforehand, and we keep on doing that, we are engaging at different levels, both regionally, nationally, well, internationally, but I think we need to make sure that our field, which is humanities, is well understood by people, and that the value of the humanities to producing new evidence, to producing science, is seen as something of value. And I think that's really something that we ourselves in our faculty can do, in our research centers, but that by doing this together and making sure that our colleagues are listening to us, that you are listening to us, is also really important. And now the next step is to make the word go out of this room to other places. So we are working on that, and hopefully in a couple of years, I think that we'll have an impact, hopefully.
You want to share a bit more of what you were talking about?
Yeah, so in terms of experience with policymakers, as part of my work has been to work with policymakers, specifically in the design, slightly different field, which is design of social policies. I've been working with very simple questions. So if you want to offer a transfer to poor families, should you give the money to the male person or to the female person? Now, in that experience, that was a question we tried to answer in a country in Eastern Europe, and the objective was basically a randomized experiment where part of the country is paid to male, part of the country paid to female, and at the end we gave the results on several type of outcomes, and we advised on what generated the best. Then the best was to pay to female, and the government made that program for the whole country. Now, what happened there? The fact is that that program was financed by an international organization, the World Bank, which put a condition on you're going to get a lot of money, you need to evaluate, you need to listen to what researchers are saying. Fine. In that case, policymakers will listen to every word I will say. So they will care about randomization, about impact evaluation, design, data collection, perfect. If you try to address the same question without incentives, I think no policymakers will care about what researchers are saying. So that's why I think we really need, I guess, good politicians, good policymakers that really care about the future, but also a public opinion that really demands policies to be opted, to be measuring, informed by research or informed by real impacts. And at this stage, I don't think that there are many policymakers or politicians around the world that would open science and then look at the result and take a decision based on that. So I think we really need to do a lot of work on that.
We have been involved in policymaker more globally than national, to be honest, through the Global Burn Disease Consortium. The studies that we publish are very important to create awareness, like I told you, not only on lay audience, but also on policymakers and also on the clinicians and the hospitals to create better guidelines for diagnostics and treatments. That's the main goal. But I think there's a lot of work to do in Portugal in terms of how researchers can influence policymakers. There's a huge gap, and I think there's an urgent need to involve institutions and universities in creating work groups, scientific work groups in many areas, in many different areas, not only on biomedical research, but in many other areas, that can influence policymakers and the government to create better programs and better initiatives to fight specific problems, to tackle specific problems. I think that's very important, and it's urgent. And I think it's urgent because we saw with this pandemic, we had a startup company and a group that created a nasal vaccine for COVID that had no help or very little help in funding from policy makers and from the government. And I think this is a shame because now we have NIH creating the nasal vaccine now. And we were already created 1 year before or 2 years before. So these are just one example from my field that I think we need really to push the governments and the policymakers to interact more with scientists and create working groups in order to influence more their decisions. I think that's really important.
I like the fact that you also put some responsibility in our side, because I think it's a shared responsibility in a way, because some researchers like Alex already have this in their objectives, but most of the other researchers we don't, and I'm putting here myself, we don't have that in our objectives. So I think it's time to go to now for the coffee break, right? So thank you very much, the three of you. I think it was a very interesting talk. We definitely should continue to have this type of discussions for the community. And thank you all for being here. And I wish you all a very nice continuation of the event. Thank you so much.
Fazer uma espécie de mesa de compra depois de manifestação com as lideranças.